Welcome to IQ HitList Special. I'm Vishwas Sadashivan. IQ HitList Special is Inconvenient Questions one-on-one extended interview that explores the views of an individual that you'd want to see. Now, my guest today, how do I describe him? He's an illustrious jazz pianist, singer, composer, and I think most importantly, much as he may deny it, he's also a good human being. We'll find out whether he really is in a while. 2016, this year, marks the 40th year of his life as a professional musician. Not that he's 80 years old now. He was crazy enough to become a career musician at the age of 16, when most of us would be busy preparing for the next exam or figuring out what university course we want to take. He was actually influenced by his friends moonlighting in Chinese nightclubs. Now, this man has traveled all over the world, dedicating his life to music and putting our little red dot on the world map. And while at it, he's the only Southeast Asian who gets to vote at the annual Grammy Awards. Is that true?
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Many years.
For many years, right? He also has a total of 21 albums. Is it 21?
No, actually, it's more than 30. Sorry, you haven't updated the bio.
You haven't updated your bio. So it's more than 30.
Yes.
Terrible. Okay, many of them recorded with musical legends like Simon Garfunkel.
I performed live with them, but I didn't
perform live with them.
Yeah.
James Moody.
Yes. Yeah.
And likes and the likes. And he released these albums to worldwide critical acclaim. Now, who says Singapore's got no talent? We'll find out a little bit more about that from him. But if you ask me, what's his biggest achievement, I say it was composing perhaps the most memorable evergreen National Day songs. One People, One Nation, One Singapore. Now, bet you didn't know it was awarded a silver medal at the International Radio Festival 25 years ago, right? Now, if you still find yourself humming to the tune every 9th of August, you can thank him, this guy, for that. He goes by the name Jeremy Monteiro, Singapore's undisputed king of swing. Tell me, how can a guy who went to SGI do so well in life?
Well, I think that's subjective, isn't it? Because,
You're being defensive.
Yeah, no, because, you look at a musician, there's a very cruel joke about a jazz musician. How do you become a millionaire playing jazz? You start off as a billionaire, and you work your way down.
So are you drawing a parallel with SGI?
Well, no. I mean, SGI was a great, in a sense, was the military band there. I had a great music teacher and bandmaster at that time. He was known as Brother Joseph Guan. And he really helped to inspire me and to be serious about my music. One of the people who did in my formative years, And I was in the band, actually. For a couple of years till I got sacked,
I figured there was a catch somewhere. Why were you sacked?
The other thing I did also, many people don't realize I took O-level music and I failed O-level music,
Oh, you're sounding like Einstein failing maths.
I loved, I'm famous for saying that I hate school, but I loved SJI. I just hated the idea of school because when I was around in secondary three, when I was about 15, I guess, I was so consumed by music already. I wasn't interested in my studies, and because I was in the best science class in the school, I was the worst student in the best class in the school. I tell you, there's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. But I can tell you something. I mean, I went to RI, and we have always had this rivalry, right? RI and Brass Bazaar. I spent six months or less in Brass Bazaar, the original RI. And remember, we had all these clashes, RI and SGI boys, and we were trying to see who can get the CHIJ girls, right? Who were in between us.
Yeah.
But what is important is today most of my best friends are from SGI.
Oh wow.
And what I like about SGI boys is they're very down to earth. Salt of the earth, and I think you've got a range of characters. You've got the straight A types, right? And then you've got the weirdos, right? And SGI was known for guys who are effeminate as well at that point in time, right? And then you have the guys who are the gangsters. Now, RI didn't have that kind of a spectrum. SGI had, and I think to a large extent that created. I mean, that was the basis of creativity. I mean, you had to learn how to survive in that sort of environment. How did it shape you and affect you, growing up in that kind of a school environment?
I find that I'm always in different situations all the way from school time till now, and I have good close friends, but I'm often in the situation but not of the situation, So I almost feel as though I had my own personal, journey that involved, of course, people. I still remember the 4 or 5 people who didn't try to beat me up for for pulling the general percentage of the scores down for the class, and they still remain friends, and the rest were always complaining, again, we could have, won in maths this year, but we went to 4 Science 6 because of Jeremy,
No, but that Jeremy, I mean, we've known each other for some time, and I can tell you that is one thing that has struck me about you. You can connect with people across the spectrum.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's actually an attribute of artists and musicians, Actually, it was
Queen not all.
Queen
Some
Victoria
of them
who said,
Yeah.
She said, be careful of artists, musicians, because they are dangerous, because they can speak and connect to people of all levels of society,
And would you say that was a very important part of creating a big hit National Day song, One People, One Nation, in 1990? I mean, you were pretty intimately involved in the conceptualization of the song, even though you didn't write the lyrics per se.
Yeah.
In the conceptualizing and, of course, composing. Could you share with us how the fact that you have met people from all walks of life and connected with the emotions helped you create this song?
Well, firstly, I think it happened when I was ready to work on it. Before then, I was working with many of the government campaign songs, the courtesy song, the productivity song, and a lot of jingles. I mean, I actually composed or produced more than 700 jingles between 81 and 93.
You were a jingle man.
Yes, I was. Yeah. In fact, there's a joke. They say that I'm sort of the last emperor of the jingles, because before me was Patrick Seat, before him was Horace Wee, and before him was, I think, someone else. I'm not sure, Vernon Palmer or whatever. But there was always a one person who held like the majority of the market. But after me, it became very dissipated because of MIDI and home studios and computers. So people were doing this work in their bedrooms. So that's why no longer one person held the majority of the work in this area. But I had actually worked on the first 3 national songs, to distinguish between the national songs and the National Day songs.
Okay.
So the first 3 national songs were Stand Up for Singapore, We Are Singapore, Call Me Singapore, which was written by Hugh Harrison, a Canadian musician, advertising professional. And I was the orchestrator. I did all the
This was in the 1980s,
80s,
right?
Yeah. I was the orchestrator and the music director and the co-producer of the original recordings of these songs. And then some years had passed where we didn't do any of this sort of work. And then
Before you go to that, you had shared with me before that the then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew was very hands-on involved in the original national songs, right?
Yes,
like
Stand Up for Singapore was his favorite. I mean, if you look at all the past National Day parades, you'll see him actually being able to mouth the words of Stand Up for Singapore along with the national anthem without having to look at the sheet. Whereas the other ones, he had to look at the sheet. So I think that was his personal favorite. He was personally involved, and many of the briefings were given, with a few of the cabinet ministers, including PM Lee at the time, to the agency that was handling a lot of the government communication.
So they were so involved.
Yeah, they were very much involved. And in fact, another thing he was involved in was he was the one who initiated the Singapore campaign, where like community centers, people all over Singapore were singing Singapore folk songs and so on and so forth. And I was tasked with actually producing the album of 50 songs.
And you're a believer, right? I mean,
of course.
You do believe in the power of songs and singing and music, in sort of galvanizing people. Some people say it's very communist, very North Korea kind of thing, But there is something to it, right?
Well, there's a huge force. Music and art has a great force, doesn't it? And the thing is, some people have used it for evil, as you know, the martial music during the time of Nazi Germany and so on, and some people have used it for good to evoke and invoke a sense of patriotism and community and so on and so forth. And I think that at the time, PM Lee was trying to use the power and the energy of music to make people feel together and feel a sense of togetherness and camaraderie. And I think, we still see that, the National Day parades, when you see people singing together.
You actually feel it. Right?
You feel it, yeah.
And especially if you're there.
Yeah.
Physically.
Absolutely. So I mean, it came to a point where I was working a lot for a friend of mine in projects called by the name of Jim Aitchison, who's more famous for his work as the writer of the Sarong Party Girl book.
Him. Okay.
And he's actually made a killing with his Mr. Midnight books, writing under a pseudonym. But we got together. I did a lot of projects for him, jingles and so on. And he said, "Hey, let's write a song and submit this to see if it can become a national song."
This was in 1990.
Yes, yeah. So we sat together in my flat at that time in Yishun and my piano, and I told him what I wanted the song to say. Basically, I observed how different people of different walks of life and so on and so forth, the diversity of Singapore, that although we celebrate the diversity, in order to keep the togetherness, the oneness that we should feel as a society. Because in Singapore, we don't go for a homogeneous, like in Australia, very often when you migrate, they try to make you as Australian as possible. Same with America, to a certain degree. But here, I think we've always allowed each different race and community to still celebrate each of their own facets of their culture and so on. But in order to not allow faults to become serious, there needs to be some kind of a gel.
Some kind of a pulling factor.
Yeah.
But it need not be physical, but something emotional
Yes.
you're talking about. So how do you identify these aspects? It's very hard, right? Because it's so amorphous.
Yeah.
How do you identify these facets, and incorporate it into a song?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I love watching people. I love people. You probably know. I just generally love people, meeting people, talking to them, and hearing their stories and so on. So I'm always listening to people's stories. Sometimes it's
basically
Kepo, exactly. Listening to people's conversation in coffee shops and so on and so forth. And then also taxi drivers are wonderful sages. Some of them. And you allow all this to kind of go into your thinking, and then you start to go. As much as I love the fact that we have all this separate festivals and so on, we still must do a lot more. And so what can I do? I'm not a politician, I'm not so what can I do? So I'm a musician, so the best thing I can do is to work with someone to write a song to get people to have this feeling of togetherness.
So how do you conceptualize it? How do you work? You can help to conceptualize,
yes,
and then he wrote it.
Yeah,
and
of course I'm right there with him as he's writing the lyrics, and we,
and then you brainstorm.
Jim likes to work right there in real time with me, and although I'm the writer of the melody and the harmonies, if I write a particular thing, then he goes, "Oh, I don't think that line comes across so well with this melodic thing," and I'll actually move. So I'm very open to moving things, changing phrasing or the values of the notes so that they can be delivered in a way that's well received by the beholder who is listening.
So in this process, Jeremy, I think a lot of us don't quite understand which comes first. Is it the music score that you compose first, and then the lyrics sort of fit into that, or does someone write the lyrics and then you compose the music? Which way does it go?
There's different ways of approaching it. Elton John and Bernie Taupin, for example, right? The lyrics always came first. Bernie Taupin's lyrics always came first before the melody, and then with Burt Bacharach and Hal David, often the melody came first and Hal David would, and then all points in between, right? So I started off, I think, being more inspired by lyrics, and then my melody would come. And then later on, I was able to actually write tunes without knowing what the lyrics were going to be, and someone would write nice lyrics to the songs after that. But I also like working together, and put 2 people or 3 people in one room, and actually at the end of 2 or 3 hours we've got a song, But this was a little bit of both. Jim had done some sketches after our chat about what I was hoping the song would say, and he, of course, having lived in Singapore, married to Singaporean, a long time PR Singapore, also has a really Singaporean attitude and a feel for it as well.
Yeah.
So then we both kept talking about the story of the song, and then he would write lyrics and he would write a verse, and then I'll look at the verse and I will actually come up with a melody for that. And it wasn't a very long process. We sat together. Some songs of mine have taken 5 weeks, right? Some campaign songs. I'm ashamed to say that I wrote the national productivity song sitting on a beach chair in Desaru in 15 minutes.
You're ashamed. And what are the lines?
The best that you can be, you know, as
the
I was
famous,
sipping,
the best that you can
as
be.
I was sipping on a pina colada. But you know, because I mean, if it comes, it comes. Inspiration. There's a songwriter called Roger Whittaker. I don't know if
Yes,
you remember
yes,
him.
Roger Whittaker.
He actually said that, you know, music and songs are actually already floating in the ether, and that composers are really just antennas that are able to grab it. And I think to a certain extent it's true, because
If
I
the
mean,
setting is right.
2 sips of my pina colada and the verse was in my head already.
Wow.
You know, so but sometimes things take longer.
course.
But with this song, we composed it. The first draft, the completed first draft, was done within 2 hours.
Wow.
And of course, we spent a couple of weeks refining, changing lines.
So, did you, in composing One People, One Nation, did you have any interactions with Mr. Lee Kuan Yew?
I had no personal interactions, but we submitted the song, and we were told. I mean, sometimes you can't tell whether or not the people in whether I actually
Whether the
tell you
press secretary or
is telling you the whole truth, right? But I mean, it went all the way to the top. So we would imagine the top at that time was Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, right?
Yeah.
And the question came down from the heavens, which said,
Not a lightning.
No. Which said, "Are you sure we are one people? Are you sure we are one nation?" You know. So we shot back and said, "It's an aspiration."
Hey,
Yeah.
I remember that word.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Lee therefore borrowed your word
I know. I don't think so.
when he spoke in Parliament
you know,
on the pledge.
You know, there's always ideas, good ideas always floating around. I think like songs.
Yeah. But it's so there's so much of emotional investment in creating a song that finally resonates with the ground, right? I mean, what is it? I mean, there have been several national songs and National Day songs. You know, there are some that have really hit the mark, right? Home, more recently,
Yes.
One People, One Nation, you know, and all this. But there are not that many that really resonated. What would you say is the X factor of a National Day song that doesn't end up sounding cheesy, that people actually sing to it, hum to it? What's the
Yeah.
factor?
Well, firstly, I think the pressure of having to come up with a song every year is not necessary. I think songs are organic and they need to kind of be birthed at the right time. You know, no doubt. You know, with some kind of push for the need, if such a need is there, and it's very hard to top Home. To tell you the truth,
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I was involved with all 4 songs, I mean, you know, I love Home. It's easily my favorite, actually.
Is it the lyrics or the melody?
It's a combination. I mean, Dick Lee is just an amazing tunesmith, and he's really very good. And I think, you know why? Because he doesn't really think so much about it. He feels it. He totally feels it, you know. And I think that's with music. Very often, you know, we try too hard. You know, there's a saying in Thailand. They say, "Don't think too much." You know, it's true. You know, some of the best work is done when you don't really. You know, we're so our intelligences are not only confined to our brain. And really, if for art, if you feel it, you let it flow. If you're not trying to impress somebody, that's really at the end of the day. You know, with artists, you know, I often tell people, young musicians, you know, what is it that you need to do? And I don't know if you remember, actually, Maslow was trying to find what were the 3 common denominators between some of the great people who walked the earth, right?
Yes.
And whether they be religious leaders like the Buddha or Jesus, or leaders like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Beethoven, he was trying to find, you know,
common factors.
Yeah, and he found 3. You know, one was they were independent of the good opinion of others. I like to say not dependent.
Not dependent on approval.
Yeah, you know, and second is detached from the outcome of any task you're doing, just only like totally focused on the moment. And in writing of music and playing of music, if I'm playing a solo in a jazz club, I'm not thinking at the end of the solo, I'm not going to get rapturous applause like many artists now do. They work for Facebook likes as opposed to just trying to just concentrate on the task at hand. And the third one maybe not so relevant to music, which is no investment in trying to control anybody else other than yourself. But
Interesting.
you know, so I think that
This is Maslow.
Yeah, this is Maslow.
Yeah.
So you know, I think that though in music, the first 2 are very important. You know, that you really just focus on the task at hand and be detached. I mean, you later on when you finish the song, then you can put on your marketeer hat or your businessman hat and then market the hell out
And
of
maybe,
it. You know?
if I may say so, maybe not even task at hand. Task sounds very, I don't know, very engineering. Yeah? I think it's more about some outcome that you want. You know, I mean, I know I may be splitting hairs, but you know, it is important when we are dealing with arts, perhaps also with sports, that you focus on the emotions.
Yes.
Because it is emotional. There's
Yes.
tremendous amount of emotional investment,
Yes.
right? When you treat arts, music, sports the same way as you treat industry development, you know, the same way you look at industry development, there might be a disjoint.
Yeah.
You know, do you think there are lessons we can learn in Singapore in the way we are promoting the arts, the way we are promoting sports,
Yeah.
music in particular? You know, because our approach, the Singapore government has had tremendous success in other areas, right?
Yes.
For example, in the traditional areas of the economy,
Yes.
right? Now we are talking about future economy, you know, and it's a good thing that Edward is from Timber, is on the committee, right?
Yes.
So the fact that you're already including somebody from the arts, you know, a young entrepreneur, you know, is a good sign.
Yes, of
but
course.
I'd like to hear your opinion. You've been around the world. Is there a different way you should treat arts, music, sports, and the like, even in the area of business development, even in the area of, you know, developing the industry?
Yes. Well, you know, if we go really way back, you know, in the primal days when humans started to first live as communities, you know, there would be the hunters who would go out to bring the food back to the village and so on and so forth. But there was always this one fellow, and he was a shaman. And the shaman had many roles to play, right? I mean, he had a bit of a spiritual role to play, but he's also the entertainment services director. You know, he basically made sure that, you know, that the dancers were going on in the rituals and so on and so forth. And the shaman didn't have to go out to go and hunt
and bring food.
And that he would be fed, really, because at the end of the day, he played such an important role. I mean, you think about the time when the Nina Pinto in Santa Maria was actually approaching the New World the first time.
Yes.
Everyone was looking out, and the shaman was saying, look at those three things on the ocean. And because there was no awareness of galleons before, nobody saw the galleons except the shaman.
Yeah.
Right? So the thing is that as time went on, the shaman became split, right? We had your religious leaders, then you have your composers, your artists, and so on and so forth. And at the time of Beethoven and Wagner and so on, they didn't have a job per se. They lived, you know, under the patronage of the royal family. You know, they would be given a home to live.
Absolutely.
The parents,
So
I mean,
there
the
was
children,
no pressure.
the children would be taken care of. The education needs would play.
Yeah.
They had food. They had a beautiful place to live, and all they had to do, Bach and Beethoven and so on, was create beautiful music.
Yeah.
So you scroll to nearer to this, you know, to the current day when music, you know, when popular music happened, there because of commerciality and so on, there was a way to support some artists like the pop musicians and rock musicians and so on. Because everyone in the global village would actually, you know, buy the albums or so on and so forth. So they didn't need to be under the patronage of any one person or government or whatever. But some of the arts do, like classical music and to some extent jazz and so on and so forth, and ballet and so on and so forth. You need, you know, a certain amount of. And but of course, as you move forward, there's always art for art's sake and art for commercial sake. We have all these graduates coming out, you know, of our music schools and so on and so forth, who end up not having any jobs. So, you know, some of them are really good performers and so on, you know, but they can't find enough work.
Not any job in the related field.
Either firstly in hotels, because hotels have actually reduced how many musicians they. In fact, most hotels don't have live music anymore. Which they, in the old days, remember, today let's go to the Hilton, let's go, you know, to the Sheraton. There was always live music, and I guess they're looking so much at the bottom line that that music is one of the things that has been scratched out. So I really hope that there can be some incentive given to hotels and restaurants who want to have music, to be given some kind of a tax incentive to.
So are we talking about some kind of a village kind of culture? Are we talking about some kind of a village kind of culture? You know, I mean, like having like Holland Village.
Yes.
You know, which seems to be a natural choice for creating some of these experiments that you talk about. I mean, some of the restaurants can have a little bit of a bistro effect.
Yes.
You know, as long as the acoustics is invested so that the sound doesn't
Bother
others,
residents,
right?
yeah.
Residents
Yeah.
or other patrons. You
Yes.
know? What are some of the places that you can think of off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, Holland Village has got a couple of places, but they're
Already,
really far,
yeah.
you know, from anywhere the residents are. Pasir Panjang Village, Seletar Hills, Rangoon Gardens, all this, even some of the HDB neighborhoods that have got like commercial centers, for example, you can allow more of the entertainment licenses to be given out. There can be different classes of entertainment license. Like maybe you don't allow amplification above a certain level so you don't disturb people, or you enforce soundproofing in those kind of venues. But I think without much difficulty, you can actually look for 50 places across the island where music can be performed, and then you therefore allow these musicians to go out and actually have work, musicians be able to circulate around not just the current few existing places but across the whole island, bringing their music and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And if you are given the opportunity to make a significant difference to the creative industry, what would you do? If you're given the opportunity to make some significant shifts, what would be the one thing that you would focus on?
Well, I think it is this. I mean, when you think about it, when the government has never created a situation where they train more doctors than are needed.
Yeah.
So you find that they have been quite clinical about this. But with music, and arts, I think we must make sure that whatever way I can help to bridge this divide of more and more musicians coming to the scene and less work available. That would be something. I mean, I sat on so many government committees since 1985, and I've even sat on the board of the National Arts Council for 2 terms. But I actually begged away from all these official appointments about 3 years ago, simply because I wanted to dedicate myself to serving Singapore in the way that I think I can do best, and I think is the most important way that I can actually contribute to Singapore, and just that's to be the best possible musician I can be.
Yeah. Have you and your peers who have done as well as you, and with connections around the world, have you gone out of your way to identify budding young talent and open doors for them? I mean, I feel that we can do a lot more there, right? Which is done in other countries,
Yes.
Apprenticeship of sorts.
Yeah.
What do you think is the scope for that? And have you done it?
Yes, of course I have. In fact, I've worked in many young musicians wherever I can. I mean, even when I was on the board of the National Arts Council, I tried to encourage the committees looking at scholarships to not just look at classical musicians. And so since then, there have been a couple of jazz musicians have gone and done master's degrees in the US or whatever it is. And for example, I'm actually been given an opportunity to play in Munich next month, and I was hired to go alone. I said, hang on, let me try and see if I can get a bit of funding, and then to help to bring along 2 young musicians so I'm trying to bring along Melissa Tam, a very good young jazz singer, and also Rich Shu, who is actually a flute player from Singapore who won the USA jazz flute competition 3 years ago. No one knows.
No one knows this.
I don't think it was even reported in the newspaper that we had that kind of a world-class jazz flute player in Singapore. So I mean, I often bring young people now on my overseas trips, and I often bring musicians who otherwise would not have a chance to perform in Europe to come with me and work with European musicians wherever I can, if I can get help for their flights and so on and so forth. So I mean, basically, you have to do that. I mean,
more of us should do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And in the industry, do you think enough is being done?
The industry is sort of a misnomer over here, because at the end of the day, you look at how, so much effort is put into making records and blah, blah, blah. But, at the end of the day, Singapore doesn't really have a hinterland because we don't have enough an audience. Our audience is not homogeneous like, let's say, Taiwan. Greater China, you have Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China, where Chinese music has got the potential of selling in the millions, right? Yeah. But over here, you only have our communities which have different languages, and then you can't really. I don't think enough effort has been done to try and get our music more exposed in Malaysia. For example, our Malay writers, right? Our Malay pop singers, some are great tunes. Some of them have migrated, like M. Nasir. We've lost M. Nasir to Malaysia. Is now a dato in Malaysia. It's a very successful career, and so on. So I mean, there's some initiatives like the Composers and Authors Society of Singapore have tried to, connect with through our own broadcasters to get our musicians, to be heard in Indonesia and in Malaysia. But to some extent, those countries in our region are still very protectionist. They still only want to promote their own people. And I think as we move, now that ASEAN is supposed to become a community, one thing I want to see first, before even our economic integration, is
this cultural integration.
Yeah, to actually allow the cultural integration to be a platform on which we can build our goodwill and build our economic cooperation.
Would you say, I mean, maybe as a concluding sort of thought, right? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. A lot of people say, I mean, that I've spoken to, say, music must come from here, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the food and the necessities will flow over time. But if you lose this soul, if you lose that soul and you automate it, you're not going to get the best music, you're still not going to get the food on the table, right? So how do you think we at a macro level in Singapore, as well as individuals, how can we continue to produce world-class musicians, such as yourself, because we do need those iconic people, who become role models for others to follow, right? Yeah. How do we establish that? I mean, it cannot be by manufacturing it. What is the single most important thing that needs to be there in our environment to allow for such natural talent to bloom?
Picasso once said that art is when mind, body, and spirit are in alignment. And I think as an individual, you always go for this. Your mind in terms of studying about harmony and music in theory and so on. Body in terms of the ability of your hands as a pianist, or your embouchure as a blowing instrument, or your voice if you're a singer. You have to make sure that your body is in full command. And then and spirit. I mean, to people who are religious, then they think of the heavens or divinity to inspire you. Or if you're not religious, then you think about humanity and nature to inspire you. And basically, every artist in trying to create good art has to try and create this eclipse of these three facets. And many things that are related to individual are also related to society. And I think that in trying to create good art and good arts policy, that it cannot be just of the mind. It cannot just be of the physical ability. It has to be a combination of mind, body, and spirit.
Where do you think we are most lacking in?
Well,
of the three.
Oh, it's.
In your personal opinion.
No, I think it's difficult to say, because I think there's been effort on all levels, right?
Stop being diplomatic. I'm asking you you suddenly becoming diplomatic. No, I'm asking you for your opinion.
Yeah.
You've been around, you've been in Singapore, the region, the world. Where do you think of the three areas, mind, body, spirit,
I think there needs to be more of a physical effort here by arts policy makers and.
But spirit?
The spirit is there. I mean, the talent now. You look at the young bands that are there now, the Sam Willows, Gentle Bones, some really amazing, Charlie Lim, and these people are, in terms of pop music, of course, and even the people in the field of classical music who have made a mark, in the world nowadays. The artistic part, the spirit part, the morale is very, very strong. We have to find a way to allow our artists to be like the shaman of old, where all they have to worry about is to be an entertainment services director. They have to just look after the well-being and the spiritual health and the soul of a village, and then make it, facilitate such that it can be done, in an easier way as possible.
Well, Jeremy, you're a bro, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm nervous, to talk to you.
You're a bro, even though you're from SGI.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that was Jeremy Monteiro. This has been IQ HitList. Log in to our website, www.iq.sg, to watch out for our next IQ HitList. Click the links to see other guests who have appeared on our previous episodes. Post your comments on social media and let us know if there's someone you would like us to interview on HitList.